Hey, welcome to Lab, the podcast. I am honored to be here with Stephanie Freed, co-founder of Rapha International. Rapha was founded in 2003, beginning with one survivor care program for underage female survivors of human trafficking and sexual exploitation in Cambodia. Rapha now serves child survivors in Cambodia, Thailand, Haiti, and the U.S. through residential and non-residential therapeutic programming, and is administered by an international team of more than 380 professionals. Stephanie's an activist in empowering girls who have faced extreme trauma to understand their great worth and value and ultimately live in sustainable freedom. Using her voice in a variety of public speaking venues, including churches, civic events, and conferences, Stephanie's committed to engaging and educating people on these topics. Stephanie has been featured as a contributor at the UN World Day Against Human Trafficking in Persons. Her and her husband, Brandon, live in Joplin, Missouri, where the corporate headquarters for Rapha International is located. And when she's not traveling around, she can be found in her backyard with her family and flowers and dogs. Stephanie, you are busy and doing work all over the world. Thanks for sharing time with us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. Well, we're honored to get the time with you. We have so much respect for people who are doing work in really, really difficult areas to express the life and beauty of the gospel, and certainly in your debt for all of the work that you've done on behalf of survivors and are doing with a team of 380 people all over the country. It's amazing. I want to get into Rapha and learn more about the organization, but I thought it would be interesting to go back. I'm really curious how you found your way to this work. It's such a particular work. And so I wondered if you could go back early in your story. Is there a moment where you can go back now and look back and say, this is early evidence of God pointing me to what would become the work you're doing with Rapha?
Yeah, so that story is a saga, but I'll give you the nutshell version, Zach. How's that?
I love it.
Um, my father is he has an international prison ministry, and around the early 2000s, last part of the 90s, early 2000s, he found himself really invested in Christian leadership conferences in Thailand and Cambodia. And it was at one of these Christian leadership conferences in Battambang, Cambodia in the early 2000s, where he met and began to engage with this incredible group of Christian leaders who had a story to tell about what was taking place, what they were seeing taking place in their region of Cambodia concerning children disappearing into sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And they made him aware of this issue. And I, I would say at the time, Zach, I was involved in some local women's crisis ministries here in the area of Joplin, Missouri, where I live. But, we were not talking about human trafficking in the early 2000s. We didn't know. We didn't know it was taking place. The news was not reporting on it. Oprah wasn't talking about it, and we didn't know. And so I just remember my father coming home from one of these trips to Cambodia and telling the stories that these Cambodian leaders had invested with him in. And I guess, Zach, I would say I'm a tad bit of a skeptical person, right? So it was hard for me to believe um, the level of injustice that he was describing was taking place, especially with children in Cambodia. And he asked me to research. So I got a challenge from my dad, Zach. That's the nutshell version of this story, is that he gave me a hard challenge to research the issue of human trafficking and see what was taking place globally concerning this issue, and to see, who was doing what and what could be done about this issue. I think that when I tell my story, I often say, at the time, I was a soccer mom, a dance mom. I had two little girls at the time, and I was just living this life of a young Midwestern mom, and we were having, birthday parties and grilling hot dogs in the backyard and all those fun things, running to soccer games and dance recitals. And this issue, when I started researching it, just it turned my world upside down. And I remember there were many months, where I would put my children to bed and I would stay up late into the wee hours of the morning. And just even back then, when you went digging for information regarding human trafficking, it was there. You just had to dig for it. And Zach, I remember coming across a UNICEF statistic that rocked me all those years ago, more than 20 years ago now. And that statistic said that more than 1 million children were disappearing into human trafficking globally every single year,
Mm.
every single year. And so there was a moment for me, Zach, that I will never forget. After months of research and that statistic weighing really heavily on my heart, I remember there was a night that I was standing in my daughter's bedroom after they had been put to bed, and they were sleeping peacefully, and they had all their stuffed animals all up around their heads, like all of our children do. And the Holy Spirit just spoke to me in that moment where I watched them in deep peace, deep, peaceful sleep. And the message was, you know, these children that are suffering these atrocities are no different than your children here. And it broke my heart. It's really hard to relegate what was taking place with children. Having two little girls of my own at the time. I agreed to make a short-term research trip to meet these Cambodian Christian leaders who wanted to take action. And it was on that trip where I actually saw it firsthand. I was able to go on a retrieval with this team on a retrieval of a little girl that lived in a junkyard with the people who had bought her and were using her and were exploiting her in all of the ways that you can imagine that vulnerable and unprotected children are exploited in. And then that million children disappearing into slavery every single year suddenly had a face, and it was her face. And she has been the face for 21 years for me personally. Those big statistics, those are not nameless, voiceless people now. They all have faces and names and hopes and dreams. And so, yeah, that's my story in a nutshell, Zach, of how we got started. And I would just say, without that group of committed Christian leaders in Battambang, Cambodia, the work of Rapha wouldn't exist today. It was really their dream and their vision, and us being able to come alongside them, that sparked everything that has happened over the past 21 years, and all of the incredible ways that God has grown this work internationally since that time.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us a glimpse of that. It's amazing the way God works in advance with your dad's work and establishing kind of a beachhead there and a connection that would be made, and that there would be an opportunity for that work to continue to expand, and that the partnership would grow, and that you all were paying attention to that and open to it and asking good questions. It's awesome to hear your dad's insight, even to invite you in and say, hey, let's research this and let's see what can be done. I think I'm with you. I really am grateful for National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. It's January. Each January
Yes.
we try to have an entire month of these kind of conversations because it's easy, I think, for all of us to fall back into, we hear these huge statistics and they're so big, and it's awful to say this, especially this is your work day in and day out, all of the survivors who are in this uh, reality day in and day out, the people right now who are hoping to be rescued and to find healing. For them, this is reality day in and day out. For so many of us, maybe we're paying attention in January and we start to see something on social media and a huge statistic like that pops through our feed and we look at it, and it's horrible to say, but our first thought is cynical. I think so many of us to go, well, there's no possible way, and we almost want to dismiss it. And one of the things that's happened here is we've had a lot of conversations about domestic human trafficking, and there's a lot of data supporting, the fact that it's through family members or close relationships, or, it's not what we see in the movies. So we have that view. And then we hear these huge numbers and we hear about children disappearing and we go, that can't be. And so I really appreciate you telling the story that, no, I saw firsthand that this is what is happening. If I can, I'd like to pull on that thread and just ask you to describe a little bit about what you've learned internationally about how this atrocity is taking place. Because for so many of us, we're so far removed from it that we can't imagine that this is actually happening. And so if you can help close that gap, I think it would be helpful for us as we try to think about not just what you're doing, but maybe how God can use all of us together to support what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that. And I would say about those big statistics, um, that definitely, what you're saying is so true, because oftentimes what happens when we see those big statistics, like, 1.2 million children disappearing into trafficking, which has only exponentially grown. That number has grown because of the internet and the just expansion and explosion of online sexual grooming and online trafficking of children. So there's a lot of work to do. But I think for Rapha, being a faith-based ministry, what really helped us was going back to the story of the Good Shepherd who leaves the 99 and runs after the one. And so, from that first time that I encountered that first young girl who had been trafficked in that junkyard, and she became a face for, thousands and thousands and thousands of children for us at Rapha. Um, I would just say that the Lord is all about the one. And if we can focus on one by one by one by one, we can end trafficking for her. We can end trafficking for her and her and her and her. And so it really is important to understand those data points that are so overwhelming, but then to really bring it back to the scope of, now, what can we do so that we don't just get shut down by all of the things that that we can't do? Because Zach, a statistic like that, a statistic like 50 million people being trapped in slavery right now today, that can render us completely inactive, because what in the world can be done about that?
Mm.
But we know that the Lord is concerned about the one, and that's how we can end this. We can end it for them. And then, through the years, Zach, I think what we learned is it is about the one. And at the same time, children don't exist in vacuums. Vulnerable children do not exist in a vacuum. They exist within families that are vulnerable, and they exist in communities that are vulnerable. And so that has been a huge lesson for us as we have expanded our work over the past 21 years to, yeah, we're always going to be about that one child, but we also need to be present in the lives through all of the services we can possibly offer to those vulnerable families and those vulnerable communities. And that's how we're going to end this.
Yeah.
Your question is poignant. I am so encouraged by you all and your desire to truly understand this issue and to look past. There's so much misinformation around human trafficking. And I just am so encouraged, that to hear you say that, yeah, this is very oftentimes it follows the lines of abuse, of what takes place in child sexual abuse. That's typically taking place with someone that is known to that child. And we see that in trafficking as well, especially now. We definitely see that very oftentimes traffickers spend time building trust and grooming a family or a child specifically. And then it's very easy to kind of isolate that child away. And then at that point, that's when trafficking or the abuse takes place. And so I'm just so encouraged to hear that you all have done the research and are really trying to get to the reality of this situation and look past all of the misinformation that's taking place around this issue.
Yeah, we've learned just slivers along the way. And as you were describing the junkyard scenario a few years ago, we were made aware of a young girl in Colombia. And this came to us through a network of people that we support. And we became aware of a young girl who was in Colombia, and her mother worked, they had a house provided to them by someone who owned the home. And the mother was in forced labor. So in order to live in the home, the mother had to work in exchange for labor. And so mom is providing by forced labor for the housing for mom and child. And it wasn't shortly thereafter that daughter was being raped every single day by the owner of the house. And so mom is enslaved through labor, and daughter was being victimized every single day by the homeowner. And you talk about vulnerability. The housing was the issue. Where are you going to go? And so, praise God, people were able to get in, and it was somebody on the ground who went after the one and saw and identified this one young girl, and the housing situation was able to be solved, and both mom and daughter got out of that. But it was the vulnerability of the housing that led to forced labor and then sex abuse. And I imagine you're seeing that story over and over and over again. What are some of the ways that Rapha is addressing those vulnerabilities and really, I guess, finding strategic ways to get in and, again, yes, rescue and provide healing and recovery, but then also think about what are some of the work that you're doing to address the vulnerability side?
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Yeah, so we work directly with law enforcement in every country that we operate in. We don't do raid and rescue ourselves as an organization, but we do work alongside justice entities within those countries. Here in the US, in Cambodia, Thailand, and in Haiti, it's really important to work within the framework of government structure wherever you're working and to honor and respect those structures. And we have loved being able to work alongside government social workers, government law enforcement, anti-human trafficking military groups that are working inside these government structures. And we saw that especially in COVID, whenever we could no longer get in to some of these international locations, they went right ahead working because they were empowered to do so. And those are their cultures, those are their communities. And so that's really an important thing that Rapha stresses, is that we are not going to be the ones kicking down doors and doing raid and rescue. We're going to work with the appropriate law enforcement entities within the countries and let them do that difficult work and support them in that difficult work. And then we are able to receive referrals from survivors that they rescue. So that is all the survivors that we serve come to us through those entities. And we are probably most well known at Rapha for our international residential survivor care programs. So that means that whenever these children are rescued and placed with us under our protective custody while their cases are being tried, while their families are being found, while social workers are trying to figure out, is this going to be a safe family at some point for this child to be reunified with? While that child is receiving counseling, good therapy, while they're getting back onto an education track. And Zach, maybe most importantly, while they're just learning to be a kid again. Um, and I'm a little emotional right now because I'm flooded right now with mental images of watching the children play in our survivor care campuses. Sometimes, whenever we hear a lot of people that visit us say, I expected to see sad children here, and what I see are just kids being kids. And I think that's what I want people to know about the kids that have endured these horrific injustices and have been rescued and placed with us. When they are given the opportunity just to reimagine and reengage as a child and have somewhat of a carefree childhood, there is so much hope, Zach. There is so much hope for them. Um, so that Rapha provides holistic services to the children, the families, and the communities that we get to serve. And those are everything from basic care, proper nutrition for kids who come to us very oftentimes nutritionally challenged, who have a lot of medical issues. Bad things have happened to these little bodies that weren't ready for these bad things to happen. And so we have a lot of medical issues we have to address while the children are in that healing process. A lot of therapy, best practices in mental health care, and getting them back onto an educational path so that they can, at some point, whenever they do leave us, that they can be sustainably free throughout their lives. Um, Along that path, we have a lot of social workers on our team in every country where we're working. I'm a big fan of the social work profession, Zach. Big fan. And so we employ lots and lots and lots of international social workers who are going out and searching for these kids' families and then doing that hard work of reunification. And just like the story you just shared about the junkyard or the family who you guys worked with in Colombia, those social workers have to figure out, how did this happen? Where are the vulnerabilities? Where are the power dynamics here that allowed for this child to be trafficked? And will she be safe in this family moving forward? And so that social work effort is just a huge part of what we do. And then finally, I would just say, Zach, being able to be part of prosecution over the past 21 years, starting in Cambodia and then moving into Thailand and Haiti, into some climates that, historically have been pretty difficult, especially for young girls to prosecute these kind of crimes. Having a front row seat to the way that these countries are growing in their legal processes, and that communities are finally seeing there are consequences for buying and selling children. There are consequences for abusing children. Zach, that is a game changer when there are legal consequences for these crimes. And so we've had a front row seat to getting to walk beside the girls that we serve throughout those court processes and being part of that grassroots change that will affect so much.
Yeah. As I listen to you describe those kids playing on the playground at the survivor care home that you guys provide them, I just think about the expense of providing a safe place. And it was a social worker, a volunteer in Colombia, who first encountered this young girl, and she literally just saw her in a home and saw a look on her face and knew something wasn't right, and had the intuition to go back and check in with her. You think about the scale of 380 employees, people working all over the country, providing just a place for kids to play for an extended amount of time. The amount of resource and stewardship and strategy that has to go in to make that true is incredible. So again, I said at the outset that we're in your debt. It's remarkable to me that God calls and equips people like you and your team to do. It's not simple. It's not simple what you're doing. It's a very complicated thing, from the international relations and the social work and the nuanced care to children. Like what you're doing, it would seem impossible, but it's happening, which is just, again, the life and beauty of the gospel on display. And I love that. I was listening to Pam Bondi was in the confirmation hearing last night, and I was really encouraged because she was talking about internationally a same thing, that there's efforts taking place, and she was involved in something in a different country where there is a change and a tide that's shifting internationally. I remember years ago hearing that some of the demand in Cambodia was coming from American business people who were going to Cambodia, and that's where they were being able to, the demand was being met in foreign countries. So Americans entering into foreign countries. And it sounds like you're saying there is a change coming. And I was interested, I read your mission statement, and I love it. I love a bold statement. It said the mission is to end the trafficking and sexual abuse of children. One child, one family, and one community at a time. And when I read it, I thought, okay, we're supposed to write aspirational mission statements, things that are beyond our reach. And we're told to do that. And then I meet people like you and I go, I think you believe it, that it's possible to end it. So if from where you started in 2003 to today, do you feel like a tide is changing and that it's possible to end it?
I think, as we've talked about, earlier in our conversation, I think that what we're talking about is ending it for that child, that family, and that community. I think I would say honestly, Zach, I do believe that the tides are changing, and at the same time, I believe that 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 the world has fallen, and until we're on the other side, until we get to heaven, I don't see a complete end to this deep injustice. But what I know is that the one matters to the Lord, and we can end it one child, one family, and one community at a time. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
I am. One thing I failed to mention a few minutes ago when I was talking about our services. I love what you all do, and we just wanted to say that art plays such a big place in our programming as well. So on each of our survivor care campuses, we have what we call the crown jewel of the campus, and that is our art therapy center. So we always say that beauty is part of Rapha's model, because we want the girls that we're serving, we want the survivors that we're serving to know that they too are beautiful, and we want them to know that they are worthy of being in a beautiful place. And so all of our campuses are full of color and flower. They're flowers, they're clean, they're organized. But the crown jewel of each of our campuses is always our art therapy center. And when those doors are open and you can hear the giggling and the laughing coming out of those art therapy centers, it's a really beautiful thing. We love the opportunity for the girls that we serve to be able to create art.
Mm.
It's one of the most healing aspects of our program. What we learned, Zach, is that a lot of times especially for the youngest children that we serve, because we serve children who are 6 and 8 years old, um, sometimes they don't have the language for the bad things that have happened to them. But they can draw it, they can act, they can express in different ways, than talk therapy, and they can begin their journeys through the opening of art. And so we love that part of our program so much, and just love providing those beautiful, colorful spaces for children, and love opening those doors and saying, you belong here. You belong here, and you have access to all of these paint colors, and anything you can imagine and want to create. This is the space for you to do that, and it's been lovely.
Yeah, I love that. Well done. Just being so attuned to the power of beauty in healing, but also hope, right? It's why, not just how we live well, but why we live. God made us to enjoy a full life, and that is beautiful and good and true. And it's a fundamental part of what it is to be human. In fact, when we started our conversation, I keep peeking behind you to look at that beautiful piece of art on the wall, because it just draws you in. And I almost ask, there's like a human figure in the center of that story. Is there a particular story for that piece of art?
Yeah, here in our headquarters in Joplin, Missouri, we have this collection of canvases that was actually created by one of our partners. She's a fantastic artist, and she created these pieces off of photos that she took while visiting us. So this canvas is of one of our girls. This was probably about 12 years ago, but we have several of these around our headquarters, and we just love them. Thanks for
Yeah,
noticing. Yeah.
it's beautiful. That green is beautiful. It just captures so much light and is beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
well done in so many ways. And I know I want to be careful of your time, but I have to ask, because when we think about this, like for our network of people who are listening, we're sitting around kitchen tables or at offices or out on a run, and we're thinking from where we are, looking through this lens, going, okay, we all are going to pray, we're going to work together in so many different ways to end human trafficking and sexual abuse, one person, one family at a time. We want to join you in that. And my mind goes to, obviously, there's rescue and there's prosecution, there's demand reduction, there's all these different aspects. Right now, where would you say are the top two places that need attention, that you as an expert say, yes, we're having this conversation, National Human Trafficking Awareness Day, and so this is in front of all of us, but maybe where are the top two areas that you say, let's highlight these aspects of this, because we can't under attend to these?
Yeah, thank you for that, Zach. I would say, first of all, if somebody has a heart to combat trafficking, do your research and find a great organization that is doing good work. Rapha is one of several organizations doing good work in this field. So I would say, without funding, we cannot pay our social workers. Without funding, we can't open the doors to the art therapy centers. So, and all of the good organizations combating this issue would say the same thing. We can't offer therapy without those financial resources. And then, secondly, I think we're talking to primarily probably an American audience right now. And so I would say here in the US, uh, to research wherever you're listening, wherever state you're listening from, research foster care within your own region, within your own state. And that might be something that you yourself could go through training to become a foster parent. There are also opportunities to offer respite care for fostering families. That means usually, typically, states want you to go through some kind of training, even to give a day off or a night off for a family who is fostering children. We see here in the US, when children are rescued from these forms of injustice, very oftentimes they end up in our foster care systems. And wow, families who have big hearts to provide foster care for highly traumatized children, they sometimes need a night off or a weekend off. And so that's something that maybe you can consider doing is if you don't feel like, you can, uh, not everybody should be fostering children, but maybe you could go into training to provide respite for a family that does. Finding ways to support children in foster care, I think, is one of the best ways that we here in the United States can end trafficking in our own realm. I think one of the populations that we forget about a lot of times are that the population of young people who are aging out of the foster care system, who don't necessarily have anybody standing on their wall whenever they age out. And I just want to say to listeners today that, when nobody knows your name, when you're kind of a forgotten entity, it's really easy to disappear. It's
Mm,
really easy to go missing. And then sometimes it's too late.
mm,
So our Department of Justice has a statistic that says, anytime an underage person is finds themselves on the street for 48 hours, uh, there is a major chance that a trafficker is going to locate and recruit
mm,
that underage person within 48 hours.
mm.
So that's our own country. Now, what can we what can we do about that? I think that's about standing on the wall for children and families that are involved in our foster care system. So I think that's a direct way that we can all be involved,
Yeah.
Zach.
Yeah. That's so good. I love that you brought up foster care and even the aging out. We know a local organization, Grow Into You Foundation. We've pointed to their work. They do specifically aging out foster care, that space, because they've identified that critical gap right there that people can go missing so easily if somebody doesn't know your name. So thank you for highlighting that. And again, just to
Very
recap,
vulnerable people group. Yes.
yeah, I mean, I love the way you're describing it too, to help us to think well about this, that it's an integral, there's an ecosystem to vulnerability. And so if we want to end human trafficking and sexual exploitation, the exploitation of persons, it does come down to economics and jobs and access and do people know you? And it's not just the singular issue of rescuing somebody from a bad situation. It's how do we think well about shalom, really, in a biblical sense, like universal flourishing. And each of us are going to play our part in that. And one particular part is the work of Rapha International. So again, if you're in this conversation, I know you're paying attention to this issue already. I would love to invite you to go and just look at Rapha International. I think there's no coincidences. There's a reason that we are connected to this work. There's an art connection. And so I want to ask Stephanie really quick before we run out of time, if we were to pray for one thing for Rapha International, just if we could partner with you to pray with you, and then also if there was a way to impact specifically the art therapy side of Rapha, what are the needs right there that we can be praying for, and then maybe specific to art therapy, what are some of the ways that you do need help? Is it supplies? Is it artists? Is it funding to supply the programs that are already going on?
I love that. I love that. So I would say if you go to rapha.org, that's rapha.org, we have a beautiful resource there. It's a 30-day prayer guide. And that is specifically geared towards not only towards Rapha, but towards the issues of the vulnerable and of human trafficking directly. So I would say go there and download that great resource and pray alongside us, especially this month of January, Human Trafficking Awareness Month. It's a great way to engage in this issue by by praying along. And then I would say, as far as the art therapy, yes, we cannot even buy paints without, again, without those financial resources. So yeah, I think any contributions that anybody wanted to make towards that specifically, we would use those funds to buy art supplies and to pay the salaries of our counselors and therapists that are teaching in those art therapy centers. And then I would also say, and everybody who's listening has a realm of influence. You all have organizations in your hometown that probably have outreach to vulnerable kids right in your own communities who also need crayons and paints and construction paper and scissors and all of those good things. So just making those resources available in your own communities is really, really important too.
Yeah, I love that. I think one thing I'm going to take away from this conversation is just your encouragement to that it's easy to go missing if somebody doesn't know your name. And for the hundreds of people who will listen to this conversation, thousands down the road of people listening to this conversation, think about the power of that network of influence. If we just make a commitment to say we don't want it to be easy for people to go missing, and in
Yes.
whatever way that is, to make a human connection and know that that is a part of ending
Yes.
human trafficking, one and sexual exploitation, one person, one family at a time. I think that's amazing encouragement. And I love what you said there, that it's a both and, that we need to go to rapha.org. And I really encourage everybody. Here's how change happens. I think it does come through institution. It does come through organizations that are working really effectively in these spaces. There's a lot of complexity to doing the work that Rapha is doing. And so you're doing it really well. And so all of us can support. So yes, go to rapha.org. Let's look at the organization, get the prayer guide, maybe pray about how you can be involved in supporting Rapha. And let's not forget the vulnerable populations in our own communities, and that starts center out from where God's put us. So it's a both and I really encourage everybody, go to rapha.org and get involved, get to know this organization, and let's think about our own backyards and that ecosystem of vulnerability.
Love it. That's great.
Yeah. Stephanie, if there was one thing that is kind of next for Rapha, is there a country that you're trying to gain access to? Is there a property that you're trying to secure? What's the next big ascent that your organization is kind of looking at right now and aiming towards?
I love that question. Thank you for that. Yeah, as we look forward, again, we are piloting here in Southwest Missouri a trauma therapy center that we believe is going to need to be placed all over the United States of America, and it would be in support of foster families, of people doing that critical work. You know, Zach, a lot of times children in foster families who are placed coming out of the deep trauma that these children have been through, you know, they get bounced from family to family to family because these good-hearted families just didn't know what they didn't know. But if we can come around and support those foster families and those biological families who are receiving their children back into their care, and those children can have stability and they aren't bounced around wondering what's wrong with me. There's something really wrong with me. I'm not good. If they can understand I am good and I deserve a family and I deserve to be safe and loved in a stable family and a stable community. So that's what we want to do here in the United States. We've seen this as a gap for children who are coming out of these devastating forms of abuse and trafficking here, is we want to provide the best support for them and their families as we can through counseling and social work efforts, and to make these resources available to children who otherwise would not have access to them, to the most vulnerable. So that is what we're working on. We're piloting a Hope and Healing Center right now here in Joplin, Missouri, that has a waiting list of about a year long of children trying to get in to have their needs met. And we see this as a resource that needs to be planted in other areas that are resource lacking around our own country.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for giving us a glimpse of that. And Stephanie, I really can't say it enough, especially this month. Thank you for your work. And I went and I listened to, I think, a speech you gave for the UN World Day Against Human Trafficking. And I was so struck by just the sharpness of your intellect and the fierceness of your conviction on this issue, and then to know you today, like to hear the compassion side of you. God's given you tremendous gifts. So thank you for using them on behalf of vulnerable people, especially kids. We're just in your debt for your work, and we want to say thank you for that. And grateful for the time. We will be praying, and I just invite everybody to pray and go check out rapha.org. And we'll be praying as an organization too, how we can encourage that art side. I think that's so beautiful, the work you're doing. So Stephanie, thanks. And we're really grateful.
Thank you, Zach.